According to a 2019 Nielson Audio Today report, 272 million American adults listen to radio each week. Today's guest, broadcast media trailblazer Jay Meyers, has been at the forefront of this powerful and ever-changing market for over 30 years. From an on-air personality to senior management and bankruptcy trustee, Jay's had direct involvement or oversight of nearly 200 markets and over 1,000 different stations in the U.S. and internationally during his unparalleled career. As owner of Broadcast Management and Technology, LLC, Jay works with businesses to help them navigate rough seas. Today, we'll discuss problem solving, multitasking, exit strategies, and more. In our trending tip, we dive a little deeper into how to manage challenges in business. Do you view unexpected changes as a threat or an opportunity? Tariq Farid, owner of Edible Arrangements, faced this question when in 2016 California legalized recreational marijuana and the term edibles took on a whole new unwelcome meaning. We'll discuss this, dive into the fishbowl, and more. Lots to get to, so let's fire it up.
If you're an entrepreneur who wants to learn how to manage time, achieve goals, and increase profits, Trending Now Talk podcast is for you. Weekly episodes include business leaders who reveal valuable insights and lessons learned. Also, your hosts Cynthia Cintron and Jeff Guadalupe share tips and trends focused on areas that will help feed your entrepreneurial spirit and fire up your success.
Jay, welcome to Trending Now Talk.
It's great to be with you guys.
It's great to have you.
Thank you.
Yeah, so there's a lot to cover, so let's start at the beginning. I understand that in high school, sports were important to you.
Yeah, I love sports ever since I was a kid, and when I got into high school, I kind of thought maybe I might want to be a play-by-play announcer. So there was a radio club in high school, and they had a half-hour program they did on Monday night, so I figured, well, I should just go and check that out, and I joined that club, and I used to do, 2-3 minute reports on the last basketball game, the last football game, and the like, and it was sort of a hobby. I didn't say, well, now I want to go look for a broadcast school and go. I actually went to college and got a degree in math.
Yeah.
Math.
And math, yeah. And toward the end of my freshman year, there was a little article little ad in the school newspaper that said that the radio station was looking for a play-by-play announcer because the play-by-play announcer had graduated. And I thought, well, okay, this is good.
Okay.
And I figured I would go up and apply for the job, but when I walked in, they said, oh, good.
You're
got
here.
Somebody, you're here. Great. It's yours. Okay. And then I just started hanging around the radio station and then got into everything else. I did talk shows, I did music shows, and I just figured that's what I wanted to be.
But why the play-by-play mentality? You were attracted to that. What attracted you? A lot of times that would intimidate people.
Well, I mean, the other thing I did when I was in high school, there was a local station. I grew up in Levittown, Pennsylvania, which is outside Philadelphia.
Know the area.
Right across the river from Trenton, New Jersey. There was a local Trenton station every Saturday. There was a fella named Bill Singer who did a show called Sports Open Mic. I used to call the show all the time. And then one day he invited me to come over on a Saturday and rip the wire copy for him. And I used to go every Saturday and do that. So it was just, I loved being associated with sports and thought maybe that's what I wanted to do. And so that's kind of what I tried to do.
Yeah. So after college and after your parents, pulled themselves off the ground when you said you weren't going to go into
not going to be a doctor.
You weren't going to be a doctor or a biologist, that you were going to go into radio.
Yeah.
What were your thoughts? What was your process?
You know what? I really love to tell you that I was a really deep thinker, but no. So I just basically, when I got out of college, I got a full-time job at a daytime radio station in another suburb of Philadelphia, and did that for about 6 months, and then my college loans came due, and I wasn't making enough money there. So I actually spent about a year in something that my math degree would have thing, and while trying to work weekends at radio stations and stuff like that. And then one day I got a call and said, we have a full-time opening for overnights.
Okay.
It was half the money I was making, and I said, yeah, okay, fine. So that's what,
Just an opportunity to do it.
yeah.
And then shortly thereafter, you found yourself on a path to the other side of the microphone. What was that transition like?
Yeah, well, it wasn't really shortly after. By the time I got to the other side of the microphone, it was probably 7 or 8 years. But I did transition from just being the overnight jock to being the program director and an on-air jock. So I moved into management almost pretty quickly. Like a year later, I left Philadelphia for Rochester, New York, and became program director there, and then went on to other places, and did that for quite some time, 7 or 8 years, and then I got offered to become a general manager in Greensboro, North Carolina, and I went and did that, and just because it was radio, I loved radio, I loved how it all worked, and so that's when I made my leap into management.
Okay. Do you find that the going from state to state has a different feel?
Well, yeah, I mean, living different places are different things. Radio is an interesting business and always has been, and that is, you can do it two ways. You can either just be willing to go wherever it takes you, or you can stay where you are and try to maneuver around. Like as I look back on my early career and stops that I had, there are people that worked for me that are still there in the town. You know, they've got roots and all this other kind of stuff. But the truth is, the people that seem to move more rapidly on the road to success are the people that are willing to go where the opportunity is and move up the ladder. I mean, you very rarely run into anybody. You run into them, but they're really rare. When someone says, "Yeah, I've been at that radio station for 25 years,
right,
30 years." I mean, those, like in other industries, in a sense, if you hear about the biggest complaints that people have about millennials now is that they jump from job to job to job to job to job, and I get that complaint, except that was the radio industry. I mean, 30, 40 years ago. Right. That's just what that is. That's more expected than not expected. That people move around a lot and stuff.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about. I enjoyed hearing about how your impetus was that you could probably do the job better than your boss.
Yeah.
Talk to us a little bit about that.
So people tell me, why did you want to go and do this and everything like that? I said, I don't know if you're going to call this a good quality or a bad quality, but I just, as I was growing up I talk about somebody that's in their 20s and 30s and 40s and say growing up, but it's just like, I always felt that maybe I could do the job better than the person that I was working for. So that leads you to look a level higher all the time. And I also was never, the other thing I think that holds people back is they'll say, I don't know if I want to do that. I don't know if I'm ready to do that. Or I don't know if I'm like,
just jump.
Figure it out when you get there.
That's the one thing about your journey. I will tell you, you have that mindset because there was something that you had mentioned. Keeping your focus was not one of the things that they could say. I think you had mentioned something, and this is not in a negative tense because my son has it, but having ADD of the brain.
I'm telling you that honestly, that's true. It's probably the hardest thing about this interview is to not be on Facebook while we're doing it. Because that'd be much more natural. That'd be much more natural for me. Like, you know what I mean? It's like I don't know whether it was because when I grew up, like I did my homework in front of the television or whatever it was, but I just cannot. I have trouble, staying with something for a long time. And so one time, I was interviewed in a radio trade publication after I was a senior vice president at Clear Channel, And they said, what do you do? And I said, well, I have 52 radio markets. I have 260 radio stations, and I also have 7 subsidiaries. I have 2 research companies that all report into me. They go, oh my God, what kind of a staff do you have? I said, well, I have an executive assistant and a half-time accountant. And they go, how can you do that? I said, well, I just figure I'm lucky because I stayed into the industry long enough where it consolidated enough where I now can't afford to pay attention to anything for more than 30 seconds at a time. It's like the best thing ever.
Well, and if you had a minute, you'd find a board to sit on or another
Right,
subsidiary.
Yeah, right, yeah.
So government to run.
Yeah, right. just like, no. So it's like.
One of the things that really struck me is that, generally speaking, business people are sort of accustomed to looking at growth, at success. They're going from one success to another one to another one. And when I was sort of looking at your background, a lot of what you did was work with stations either to help turn them around, or dealing with them in receivership, or to sort of bring them out, bring them up from a down. What's your mindset? How do you manage expectations?
Well, it's a good question. So I think there's different kinds of skill sets that people have. Like someone who runs a successful business and can go to another successful business and run it from the front may not actually have the skill set to be able to go into a failing business and turn it around. One of the great things about when I was with J-Corps and then Clear Channel and had a lot of stuff to do, at any time I had front runners and failures. So I had to learn both sets of skills in order to apply them to the thing, because it's not the same thing. It's not, if you're the leader in something, the skill set you need to remain the leader is not necessarily the thing as when you're failing and you're trailing. I mean, you can read any kind of books there are marketing books from the 70s and 80s by a tandem known as Reese and Trout, and they talk a lot about positioning and marketing warfare. I always highly recommend folks to read the book Marketing Warfare by Reese and Trout. And it talks about the different positions you can have in a marketplace. And it's basically, it applies war theory to the business function. Like if you are the leader of an industry, the first thing you do is you play defense. You play defense because you're defending your turf. So you're defending your turf. The other thing that you need to do when you're a leader is you have to pay attention to your competition. And as soon as literally the second they do something that you go, wow, that's pretty cool, that could hurt us, you immediately do the same thing. You have to do it better. The exact same thing, because you're the leader. So therefore, you're going to get the credit for it, even if you're second in. As long as you react quickly enough. Right. You can't let that. So if you think about it in war theory, a defender is standing on top of the hill, shooting down at the folks that are coming up the hill. They're on offense.
Yes. And
when you're on offense, what they teach you, the number one thing you need to do is you need to look for a weakness in the strength of a leader and attack there. Think about that for just a second in a broad sense. Weakness and strength of a leader. They use an example, which is a really good one. So back in the day, Hertz was the number one, and Avis was number two. And Avis's slogan was, remember? We try harder.
Yes.
We try harder.
Okay. It's nice. Their point was.
That's why I don't remember.
Their point was, what's the biggest problem with Hertz? That people complained a lot, and the answer was always, the lines at the counter are way too long. It's not like now where we have, you got the gold and you just go in, you pick up. It wasn't that. Everybody stood in line, no matter who you were, in order to get a card. So their point was, Avis's slogan should have been, come to Avis, our lines are shorter. It's an indefensible, without, ramping up staff, building more counter space and everything, and investing all that money. That was a weakness that Hertz couldn't defend. That's
That
where
marketing
that
strategy.
that would have been the marketing strategy to attack.
And it's a
that.
direct, right? It's a direct attack. The
Right.
first slogan is passive.
Right, it's passive, but it's at a weakness in the that they can't
Refute.
not only refute, but they can't easily fix.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Without
Right,
ramping up the
right.
staff.
Now, if you get through on that, then you got to figure out, well, then how do I defend where I've arrived, and what do I do about that? Because my lines are going to get longer too, but that kind of thing. And then there's two other strategies, which is, one is, it's called the flanker thing, and so if you look in the war strategy situation, is that you look, the guys at the top of the hill, they're playing defense. The guys coming up the hill, they're playing offense. If you come in, you're not well funded or whatever. You can't get into a battle with anybody, and you go, oh, look at that little hill over there. There's nobody standing there. Let's go fill that. So, like in radio, we would look at a top 40 station as being, there'd be a leader, and then there'd be other top 40 stations that'd be trying to get them. But if you were a little guy, you wouldn't want to get into that battle. You'd say, oh, look, there's no oldies station in this town. Let's go be oldies. And then you go and build that to whatever you can, and you defend your turf over there. But you're never so big that the big guys want to come after you.
Right.
And then my favorite one is the fourth position, which is to be a guerrilla. And what you do as a guerrilla is you just sit in a tree and you shoot at people, and then they start shooting back. You bug out.
Yeah.
So you get a position, and then someone says, "Oh, I like that position. I'm going to go get it." You don't fight them. You just go, "Okay, I'm out of here. I'm going to go find another tree."
Do you have a to-do list that includes fixing things that are cracked, broken, old, or half done? Stop stressing. Call Diversified Contractor Services, the premier choice for those in need of the professional alternative to doing it yourself. Diversified Contractor Services specializes in helping seniors, small businesses, and busy professionals who don't have the time or ability for light construction, repairs, or maintenance services. Their trained, dependable, and licensed team are ready to help with tile repair, light fixtures, painting, pressure washing, landscape installation, small to mid-sized construction jobs, and more. Diversified Contractor Services offers high-quality workmanship that's honest, dependable, on time, and done right. Call today for a free estimate, 321-215-8208, 321-215-8208. Also, connect with us on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Just remember our name, Diversified Contractor Services.
N2 Publishing is the leader in their industry, creating custom publications that connect neighbors to neighbors and business owners to hard-to-reach customers throughout the nation for nearly 15 years, and locally in Satellite Beach with Tortoise Island Living magazine for over 10 years. N2 Publishing is passionate about turning neighborhoods into communities, and through a hyper-targeted, multi-touch point approach, their business partners reach their ideal customers in a unique and powerful way. If you are ready for your business to make the right impression with the right customers, call today 321-604-0595. That's 321-604-0595. Also connect with Tortoise Island Living magazine on Instagram and Facebook.
So Jay, those are really powerful strategies in managing business. Now I'd like to talk a little bit about your management style. It's unique and it works.
Yeah, I mean, I get that question a lot, and it's like the hardest question to answer because I don't really think I have one. I think that every situation dictates what you have to bring into that situation, as a manager. What you might do if you move into a successful station or business versus one that is on the verge of bankruptcy. Those kind of things are like totally different. I don't believe that you can actually treat all employees the same. You know what I mean? That certain people need different things from you that other people don't need from you. So I never, when I never like sat behind a desk all day or that kind of thing. I mean, I was always walking around into other people's businesses. My all-time favorite story of that one is when I went to my second general manager's job, and I think this may have been like the second week on the job and everything, and I wandered back into the engineering lab where the engineer was to ask him a question about something and everything like that, and he sat there kind of timidly and he looked at me and said, "Before we get started, can I ask you a question?" I go, "Well, yeah, what?" He goes, "Am I getting fired?" And I said, "No, why?" He said, "Well, I've been here 17 years, you're the 5th general manager, and you've been back here more in a week than all of the other 4 have been in the other 16 years.
Wow.
I mean, it's just like, I just think people are more comfortable in their space. You don't have to be in your space. You get more information about it. The other thing is, I've always had a philosophy that in an organization, it should never be put together in a way that a decision is made at a level higher than it can be reasonably and competently made. And that goes from the very basics of let the receptionist order the office supplies. You know, I mean, he can't, you know what I mean? That gives them responsibility, makes them feel like they're part of something, or whatever it is. But if you look and you go, okay, you know, I can make this decision, but this person here can make that decision too, and they're a rung lower than me, that's where it ought to be. That's where it ought to be made.
So you feel like you have more of a personal touch with the people that work with you?
I try to actually do that. Try to have personal touch with people. Like when I had at the peak of Clear Channel, I had 52 radio markets. So I mean, there's only 52 weeks in a year. So I literally, you know, and I needed to go to, you know, big places like, you know, San Diego or Los Angeles or Minneapolis more often than I needed to go to Shelby, Montana. Okay,
right,
you know what I mean?
Right.
But when I would go to these places, I tried to make it sort of an event, and I always tried to make an appearance in town. I had the entire state of Iowa. We had like, I don't know, 8 or 9 radio markets in Iowa, and I had a regional that with me, and I would just fly up to Sioux City, which was in the far northwest corner of Iowa, and we just pretty much drive the state, and we drive into Mason City, and they had a barbecue planned, and we had a couple of meals, drove out of there an hour and a half later, you know, but spend the time talking, and so everybody feels like somebody at corporate actually knows them, cares about them, and does those kind of things.
It doesn't seem like it's corporate thinking, though.
Well, it's not. I mean, but to me, that's the kind of touch that separates the really good companies from the not so great, you know, companies in any business.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And to that point, that's also, I think that there's a line to where you're personal, where you are supporting your staff but keeping a distance.
It's an interesting situation, and it's like the easiest way I can put it is this way: that if as a senior manager, as the boss, as the CEO, or whatever the situation, if you're invited to a party at an employee's house, it's okay to go to the party. But when you're planning a dinner party at your own house, the employees should not necessarily be on your list of invitees, because if you don't invite everybody, it becomes, you know, if you want to have a company party at your house and everybody's invited, that's great.
Yeah, it's a level of separation. I know that I have colleagues that have, you know, in conversation, they'll say that they become very close with their employees, or they feel sorry for this employee, or they get involved in their personal life. And really at the end of the day, when you're talking about loyalty and you're talking about where what matters, I think that one of the things that I took from you was the loyalty should be to to you as a business owner, because if you're not taking care of the business, it fails.
Right, that's correct. I mean, you can be loyal to your employees and care about them and everything like that, but you have to be able to make the judgment as to whether that loyalty is affecting the overall business significantly. I mean, if it's like, oh, they're having a tough weekend, they're really good, and you bring them along and all that other kind of stuff. But if they are just, the business. I'll give you an example. It was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. So when I got my first big break and went to Rochester, New York to be a program director for a radio station, I went to a station that was the last station in the market, bottom of the market. And in a year, I had the station top 5.
Wow.
My night guy, his dream was to be on the radio. And interestingly enough, he had a stuttering problem. But he was a little Mel Tillis-like, so that when the microphone cracked, he could do something with his voice and the stuttering wouldn't happen. But if you walked in and he turned off the mic and you would talk to him, he would stutter. Well, his talent level peaked at a time where, when he joined the radio station, we were all here and we grew, and he peaked and we grew. And so I needed to upgrade the position, as much as I loved him as a person and everything like that, because for the business to continue to grow, I had to make the change in order to do that.
Yeah.
Hard decision.
And you can't make those decisions if you don't have that separation. When
Right,
you're
you
in a
have to be able to separate the situation. Now, so I do a lot of management consulting, and one of the things that I do is a lot of individual businesses, small businesses or whatever, what they really actually lack, believe it or not, is they lack corporate oversight.
Yeah.
And so, but that is, as a corporate person, what you can do is you can fly into a place and come in and evaluate things at what we call the 30,000-foot level with absolutely no emotion. You don't
have
know
emotional
anything about the
ties.
people's
Well, you can
lives.
see what
Anything,
they
you can
can see.
basically, you can say, so this is what you need to consider, because this, and this, or hey, this person over here is smart, but they've been with you for 7 years, and you got them in a box, and you're missing an opportunity to advance them or to listen to them for ideas that can grow this business and the like. So, one of my favorite business shows on TV is called The Profit. It's on
I've seen it. It's
CNBC.
fabulous.
And
Fantastic.
if you watch that show, a lot of times he goes in and talks a lot to the employees in the business, and he learns. He'll say, "This
you
person
can
is
benefit
smart.
from.
This is the person who should be running your operations. You should be back doing,
Exactly.
those kinds of things." And so that's kind of what you bring from the outside to doing that.
Yeah. So along the lines of evaluating your business and looking at your business from a 30,000-foot view, as a business owner, or before you start a business, during your business, there's a life cycle. There used to be a time when someone would go into business, they would build it, and then they'd hand it down to their children. That day is gone.
Right.
Now businesses, it moves so quickly, and businesses evolve and change and do what they do. Talk to us about when you consider an exit strategy and valuation. I know these are two really important topics that we talked about that I thought were...
So, looking at valuation, in different economic times, and I'll just talk specifically about radio, but when we used to buy radio stations back in the late 90s, we used to buy them and we'd say, okay, we're going to buy them at this amount, we can fix them, the radio business is going to grow 7% a year, the multiples that people are paying are going to go up by 4 times, and so we're buying it here, and it may look like an exorbitant price, but oh my God, it's going to be worth this much down the road. Now, when a lot of industries don't have significant growth, it's all about the entry price. You've got to, you can't believe that a miracle is going to happen down the road so that you'll be able to sell the thing for much more than you bought it for. Perfect example is the newspaper business. you take a look at some of the major newspaper groups and everything like that. I mean, I just wrapped up a project in San Diego early last year, and the San Diego Tribune, you know, someone bought it for 500 million, and 2 years later somebody bought it for 300 million, and then, you know, and then 175, and then 90, and I don't know what the last sale. And every one of those people that bought it went into it with the following thought: can't get any lower than it is today.
Wow. Yes.
Okay. And so what you have to do is you have to make sure that your business model supports your entry price, so that if the only thing that happens is you make enough money to pay down your debt service over a period of time, that you make a little money on the way out that way, and don't assume that you're going to be able to grow the business. Now, if you're in some hot new business, you know, I know we'll talk about it later, but if you were like in the CBD business, you could make a case that this, you know, I'm going to get it there, and I'm going to have this plan where I'm going to be able to franchise out into the states as the other states start to do that. I mean, you can have some kind of, but in a normal business, I mean, I think you just have to be, this is where we're at. You know, things happen economically, the recessions happen and things like that. You got to be planned on that. The other advice that I give people is that you ought to know the price that you will sell your business at any point if somebody offers it to you, without thinking another second. So in other words, if I bought this business at $1 million, and if somebody walked in and offered me $3 million, I'm out of here.
Right.
You got to know that literally the day you buy your business, because someday if economics go right or the business is a situation, somebody walks in and offers you that, and you say no, and then the cycle goes bad.
And it crashes.
Background story on that. Learned that lesson from a guy that gave me my first big break when I went to Rochester, New York. He went on, I worked for him a couple of times. He went on and owned radio stations in Rochester and Buffalo and in Youngstown, Ohio. And he was, when he was 50 years old, somebody came in and offered him $30 million for his company. And at that time, he owned most of his company. And his point was, I'm 50 years old. I'm not ready to go watch the waves roll in on the Bay of Fungi. I want to work another 10 years. And so, no, thanks, appreciate it. Well, that was in 1987. 1988, we went into a little bit of recession. Radio station prices crumbled. The FCC created more frequencies, which depressed the values even further. And he ends up having to work another 10 years to 1997. Sells the company for $30 million and walks away with, I don't know, 7 or 8%, because he had to borrow from venture capitalists and vulture capitalists and everything like that to keep him through the lean times and so on down the line. So you need to know what your exit price is before you go in place.
That's amazing.
Thanks for the
advice.
example. That's a good example.
That's incredible advice. So, talk to us about radio. What's the future of radio and media in general?
It's interesting. I mean, because, you know, it's like, the truth is nobody really knows. The only thing I can tell you is, if we go back 35 years and do kind of a snapshot, 1985, 2020. So you said it in your 272 million. That works out to be about 92% of the adults in the United States. Okay, so 1985, that number was 97%. At the 1985, 84% of primetime television viewing was done among the 3 major networks. Okay, the home delivery of newspapers went to about 71% of the households in the United States. The average home got 3, sometimes 5 magazines delivered to the door. So now let's fast forward. Now we have 4 major networks, and I think on a normal night their primetime viewership may hit like 40%, 41%. do you know anybody that gets a magazine at their house that they
Not
pay
anymore.
for?
We were just talking
You know,
about
and
that.
it's like-
Some.
I'm a publisher.
Not the free deliveries, not the free deliveries. I'm talking
No,
about-
I
yeah,
actually still, but it's people who have a passion.
Actually, right,
Yeah.
you know,
That's correct.
a magazine.
I'm the only one.
I mean, I still get a newspaper because I like to do it in the morning, but I spend about a minute and a half with it, and like I'm one of the 15 or 17% of the people that get a home delivery of a newspaper today. So if you look at it in that snapshot, the radio business looks like it's fairly healthy and it has legs to it.
Right.
And so there, you know, with everything that's, you know, I have done a lot of phone consulting with Wall Street people because they, you know, radio is not a sexy business anymore, so there aren't any analysts anymore that follow the business. So if they're looking at an investment, I'm part of a consulting conglomerate where they offer services to Wall Street. So I talk to the people, and for years I used to get I hear your business must be dying because of satellite radio. And I always used to say, well, do you know what the subscriber base is for satellite radio? And they go, yeah, it's like 14 million. And I used to go, good. Let's pretend we have businesses, the two of us. You have 14 million customers. I have 272 million customers. Who's beating who?
Right, right.
Drop the mic.
Yeah.
Drop the mic and walk away. You know?
I love it. Just because we're on a podcast. What? How do you feel about on-demand podcasts?
So it's interesting. I haven't quite been able to grasp it myself because the truth is that there are, at last count that I saw, about 760,000
That's correct.
podcasts
Yeah.
out of that, and I'm not sure we're into four figures on the ones that are actually making money.
You're right.
Right.
So, but I think that podcasts have so I'm unsure about it as a business for that reason alone. But I will tell you, it's a sexy space because all the big guys that are in the radio business who are public stocks are buying up a lot of podcast companies because unfortunately that with new tech and all that other stuff, sometimes it's smoke and mirrors. Remember 20 years ago the .com bubble burst. You know what I mean? That's because so there's a little bit of but in terms of attracting investors to your company, it's sexy, and so somebody may figure it out and figure out how you can make money with all kinds of podcasts. But I thought the CEO of iHeart gave a speech at one of the conventions a few years ago. I thought he described he said, someone asked him to describe podcasting versus radio, and he said, I want you to mentally think about the CNN website. He goes, you go to CNN website and there are 40 stories on the front page, and there's a headline and there's a little bit of information on it, and for some days you go there and that's all you need. And some days you go there and one of them will catch your eye and you click through. He goes, well, that website, that's radio. The click through, that's the podcast.
I actually am a consumer of both. I've never even seen them as competitors other than it's just another media source. But I hook my phone up in my car, and there are times where I've got the podcast going, and during the course of a day, I'm listening to the radio more often than I'm listening to the podcast.
Yeah, because the radio is in real time with you. That's the difference. Radio's always been
It's easy to access.
It's a companion medium, so it's
Absolutely.
operating in real time with you, so that's the difference.
Quick question, just real quick, that live for today, because it seems like your entire life is based around that thinking.
Yeah, I just, my wife, we've always we have a good life. We've had a great time in it because we've pretty much spent most of our time living our daily life rather than worrying about, down the road or that kind of stuff, or worrying about things that happened 10 years ago or everything like that.
Right.
It's like, it's just, you're going to be, if anybody needs to understand the live for the day philosophy, all you have to think about is Kobe Bryant.
Yeah.
Okay? I mean,
Yeah.
it's like you live for today because the helicopter can go down tomorrow, and I don't mean that to be
No, that's a
disrespectful
strong
or
Yeah,
anything
no,
like that, but
no,
that's the
it's
truth.
Strong point. Strong
Yeah.
point.
definitely.
Well,
Well,
thank you for that.
Jay, thank you. This
You're
has
welcome.
been so enlightening.
Thank
I kind
you.
of have felt like we were at a fireside chat. I wanted just to roll over just with the chocolate and just listening. Yeah, it's just a wealth of information. I'm so grateful that
Thank
you
you
came
for
and shared
having
it
me. I
with
really
us.
enjoyed it.
And now we're going to make fun of you.
Okay,
No.
let's do it.
This is the fun part.
This is what I look forward to.
So this is the time when we do the fishbowl. And the fishbowl is really fun because major corporations, many of which you've worked with, hire employees, and they hire at all levels. And they have found that asking them questions that might knock them off their center a little bit reveals quite a bit about them. For us, it's just amusing. So
That's great.
so I would ask you to reach
Okay.
in there. We might do a few questions
All right.
depending on,
Okay.
not everybody's just not
Touch your forehead. No.
touch your forehead. Get ready. We'll see. Maybe you're hired. Maybe you're not. Oh, okay. So interestingly enough, this is asked at bandwidth.com. This is for a marketer candidate. What kitchen utensil would you be?
Oh, wow. I love that. I would say a whisk.
A whisk?
Yeah.
Why would you be a whisk?
I stir everything up.
You
pretty
do.
much, yeah.
You like to stir it up. All right, let's do another one.
I like that
That's
one.
good.
That
That's
was
a
a
good
good one.
answer,
That
too.
was a good one.
I'd hire you at Bandwidth. Oh, no, you mix it up
Oh,
and you
sorry.
grab it. I don't know. I might catch what this is. Okay. Let's see. Oh, I love this one. Okay. This is from marketing analyst at T Sheets by QuickBooks. What's your spirit animal?
What's your spirit,
Spirit
animal?
Honestly, it's a dog.
It's a dog.
I mean, like, I love dogs.
That's
all kinds
Yeah.
of dogs.
See?
All dogs.
You know what? They're loyal. They're
Right.
happy. They're doing their thing. They're in the
Right.
moment.
Like
Right.
Coco.
You know. I would like to be a platypus.
Okay, you scare me sometimes.
I know, but the thing that's attractive about the platypus is that it's so many things.
Okay.
On any given day, you wake up depending on which way you're facing. You know, am I a duck? Am I a beaver? Am I? You know.
I'll be with the dog.
Yeah. Sounds like my 16-year-old daughter, so it's all good.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, you're hired.
Thank you.
That's
welcome.
it. We're good.
So Jay, thank you so much for coming
You're
to
welcome.
join us for this, and I'm super excited because Jay is going to join us for our trending tips segment as
Yes,
well.
we're glad you're gonna be able to stay for
normally we
that.
say goodbye, but you're staying.
Okay, I'm here.
Yeah.
Yay!
nowhere.
All right, and we'll be right back with our trending tip. Jake Estrada, world-renowned creative madman of operations, is the founder of Space Coast Comics, Brevard's first and only free print and digital comic magazine. Jake is also the creator and publisher of a series featuring his classic hero, Bokas, an archangel who has fallen from grace. With superhuman powers, he now roams the earth, helping the innocent and punishing the guilty. The Bokas movie is now available on Prime Video. Watch it today. Jake is also the co-host of the Indie Originals live podcast, available on your favorite app, including Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, YouTube, and more. To learn more about how to enter his Indie Filmmakers competition, his books, and many other multimedia creations, visit spacecoastcomics.com. That's comics, COMIXX.com. IndieOriginals.com, or send an email to Jake at estradajake@yahoo.com. That's ESTRADA Jake@yahoo.com. Welcome back to Trending Now Talk. I'm Cynthia Cintron, your host, with Jeff
Guadalupe.
Guadalupe, and we're here with Jay, and we are going to dive into this trending tip. And funny enough, I'm actually holding in my hand a prehistoric object, which is a magazine page.
People forgot what a magazine looks like.
I actually have Entrepreneur Magazine delivered, and I have it on my phone as well. I just love the feel of books and pages and magazines, etc. And I'm a publisher, so of course I would. So today we're going to talk about this article. Is it a threat or an opportunity? This article ran in the January-February issue of 2020's in 2020 for Entrepreneur Magazine, and it talks about the founder of Edible Arrangements, Tariq Farid.
Good stuff.
Ah, good stuff.
Oh, my
right?
word.
The fruit,
You can stop right there.
cantaloupe,
I'm done.
watermelon, such good stuff. Okay, so Tariq is going along. He's running his business. People start calling it edibles, and he thinks it's really cool, so he decides to trademark edibles.
Yep.
And really cool. He's put all this money into it. He shifted his company, and then in 2016, California decides to legalize recreational marijuana, and the word edibles takes on a whole new meaning.
Cannabis.
Tariq kind of panics. Jay, what would you do if you were in Tariq's shoes?
Well, there's two things that I personally would have done. I don't know what Tariq did. Number one is I would have embraced it. So if you go back to when we were talking earlier, that would be essentially he's the leader in his place, and that the loss of that word is an attack on potentially his weakness. So the only way to save himself there would be to mirror the attack, which would be to open up and be available to offer that kind of an edible. The second thing that I would have advised him to do would have been to have separate divisions. I would have inserted the word fruit in the middle of edible and arrangements, so that he would transition to become edible fruit arrangements, so that longtime customers would still know where to be able to go to do that. But under the master brand of edible arrangements, he could have offered CBD
Options.
products.
Yeah.
Options.
And that's actually very close to what happened. So he, first he panicked, which we all could
But
do
it's
for
legit.
a minute.
It's
5
legit.
minutes,
I mean,
panic.
because for somebody who's never smoked before, he said
Yeah,
that.
well, he had no interest, none of it. Then he decided to sit down and do exactly what Jay suggests. He decided to study it and understand it and embrace it. And he ended up creating, he launched a retail experience, a separate arm.
Right.
Incredible edibles.
Yeah, and they were, incredible edibles. And he basically he said, look at it, study it, spend some time on it, and you may just see an opportunity, a big opportunity. So let's talk a little bit more about that process for our entrepreneurs who are listening to this. My guess is that there was a collective gasp of, oh my gosh, they're taking my space. What do I do? And that happens, right?
That
People
was a
get
brand.
really, they become so in love with their business that they can't, sort of allow it to do its thing organically.
Right. I mean, you gotta grow. You gotta change in doing it, because it's so there's a business thing that a lot of businesses do, the SWOT analysis. Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And so where businesses sometimes miss the connection is there's a connection between strength and weakness. I was describing it earlier. You know what I mean? The long line it hurts is a weakness, but that's because you got a lot of customers. That's a strength. So there's also a relationship between opportunities and threats. And so you can either panic from a threat or try to figure out how you can turn the threat into an opportunity, which is exactly what he did.
Yeah.
Also taking the time to invest in finding out about it. He did a lot of research. He
Yeah.
traveled. He went to Columbus, Ohio. He was talking to individuals and corporations on what it was all about.
Yeah, he took
And-
over a year.
Yes,
to-
yes. And then he also talked about an individual that he says, that their mother was using. So
CBD.
now it touched him because his mother had, had an
Right.
influence on his business. And that's when he said, maybe this is something I need to take a closer look at. So sometimes even before panicking and making a larger decision, you got to do some research and to see how it's going to affect. I mean, I'm sure he's not second thinking it now with
No.
Incredible Edibles.
Right, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
embrace it and yeah, sort of look at it from the other side. And I'm actually going to put up on Facebook the SWOT because I was pulling it up and researching it, and it is really important I think for entrepreneurs to really realize you can have a passion for the work that you do, but you cannot fall in love with your business to the point that you're blinded
Right.
to what's going on in the industry. You really do have to look at that 30,000-foot view.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's the that's a significant portion of my business is going to smaller places, whether it be a small radio group that I advise here in Florida. My client in the Cayman Islands is just to offer them essentially a C-level executive service on a consulting basis to provide them with that outsourced 30,000-foot view, because every business needs it, but it doesn't make any sense at all to say, well, I'm just going to go hire a CEO. I'll go pay them ridiculous amount of money, and my business is going to go under because I can never support what I pay them. But
Yeah.
I need that thinking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I know that for example, in my business, especially once a year, like either at the beginning of the year or the end of the year, I do sort of spend some time to sit down and reflect on, the comments that I'm receiving. If you're receiving negative comments, instead of just balling them up, throwing them away, and say, "Oh, these people don't know anything," listen, because if there's a consistency, if there's the long lines,
Right.
there might be an opportunity that you're missing because your ego's in the way.
Absolutely.
You have to take the pulse of the business. In any business, you have to take the pulse each and every year. And that's good that you say that, because a lot of people don't. They get into that, this is how I've always done it.
Yeah.
I've always done it. And then when the market's changed, you mentioned that earlier, you have to take a feel of the market, see how things are changing. I mean, back in the day, we talked about radio, music, when it comes down to 8-tracks, to cassettes,
Right.
to CDs, to MP3s, to
Right.
look where we are now.
Well, it's exactly true. I mean, going back to the Hertz example, the truth is the Hertz Gold was, I don't know this factually, but it would clearly be a response to, oh, we've got a weakness, long lines. So what do we do for our loyal customers? We provide them with a way of bypassing the lines. The bus is just going to take you, your name's going to be on the board, you go to your car, and away you go. It used to be you had to go in and pick up your stuff. Now everything's in the car, and they've moved it now to where there are no lines anymore at Hertz, because it's now the keys are in the car, and
Just
they
waiting
print your
for you.
contract out at the exit gate.
Huh.
So
okay.
there's no
It's
one
amazing.
there. Yeah.
Yeah, I like it. It's very similar to that strategy that you suggested, where if you're up on your hill,
Right.
and you're looking around, look around. There's a hill over there,
Right.
and go conquer that hill.
Right.
Now you've got two. Or if this hill goes, you're still
Right.
ahead of the game.
But that was a good lesson, and always looking for the opportunity and not always the threat.
Looking for the opportunity. You never know what it's dressed in or where it is.
Absolutely.
Jay, thank you so much again.
I enjoyed being here. It was
It was
a lot
cool
of fun.
having you
Thank
stay
you
with
very
us.
much.
Thank
Well,
you.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
for sharing so much information with our audience. And I'd like to, on behalf of Jeff and I, thank you to our listeners. We've added more apps where you can pick up Trending Now Talk. Check out our Facebook,
Like
Instagram,
us on Facebook.
like us, subscribe, watch. And as always, thank you to the crew at Eastern Florida State College,
Do a great
Digital
job.
Media and Television program, for taking such great care of us. And we'll see you next time.
See you then.
Thanks for listening to Trending Now Talk. Join the conversation today. Download and subscribe for free on iTunes, Buzzsprout, and Spotify. Trending Now Talk is recorded at the Eastern Florida State College Studios in Cocoa, Florida.